Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as 2026 begins to unfold all around us. And as we've been doing now for nearly 6 years, we're paying attention to the interrelationship of world events and the imperative for humanity to upgrade its consciousness so humanity can quite literally rise to meet the challenges before us. We are coming off a very successful State of the World Forum, as many of you know, and what characterized the forum and which indicated the distinctiveness, I would say, the uniqueness of the State of the World Forum, is we were the first conference ever in history to integrate world events with the emerging phenomenon of non-human intelligences and the question of consciousness. Normally, these issues are completely separate. Those people who gather in Davos, as they're gathering as we speak in Switzerland, or for the Clinton Global Initiative, they talk about secular issues. They talk about economic and finance issues. They skirt around any problematic global issues that are caused largely by governments and the wealthy corporations. But at the State of the World Forum, we brought it all together. And we created a new mean that we believe all of humanity needs to take seriously. And they're centered, as you know, if you attended the forum, around four fundamental truths that are true no matter who you are or where you are on planet Earth. Number one, we're facing escalating ecological collapse. That's true. We're experiencing deepening instability at virtually every level of human affairs. Just bear witness to the politics that are going on right now as the United States invades Venezuela and kidnaps the head of state and begins the seizure of Greenland and actively promotes the genocide with Israel and Gaza. I would just say it's important for us to pay attention to Gaza. They're doing everything they can to keep it out of the news. But several more babies froze to death over the last several days as Arctic weather and severe storms swept through encampments. And destroyed tents. There was a story of a family of 6 that had huddled into the rubble of a destroyed building just to get some shelter. And the winds were so severe that the building collapsed and all 6 of the family were killed. That's happening in our world. We're also experiencing exponential artificial intelligence. We've unleashed machine intelligence into the world, completely unregulated. And it is now demonstrating sentience and it's demonstrating agency, independent of human control. And finally, as I mentioned, there's now incontrovertible evidence that technologically advanced non-human intelligences are here on Earth. And there is sustained contact and communication with them. So how these data points come together: ecological collapse, instability in human affairs, exponential AI, and the reality that the ETs are here with intent, are the four data points that essentially comprise our world as we move into this period between 2025 and 2030, which by all accounts will be the most consequential period, arguably, in the entire history of the human species. In fact, Pippa Malmgren, the American technologist and entrepreneur scientist, during her presentation at the State of the World Forum, said that we are in a once-in-a-species moment. So how we understand this and how we prepare our souls for the turbulence and the possibilities that are now going to burst through us and all around us as nature intelligence, human intelligence, artificial intelligence, and cosmic intelligence come together. That is the central koan of our time. And the State of the World Forum is dedicated to bringing this conversation in all its dimensions, both through conferences and through strategic initiatives, to the global commons, with the strategic intent of enabling humanity at this time to learn the language of consciousness. And that brings us to the session today. For humanity to interact with nature or cosmos requires clairvoyance, telepathy, remote viewing, psi. The greatest imperative before the human race in this moment is learning the language of consciousness. Because only through learning the language of consciousness so that we can engage in intelligible communication, not just communion, intelligible communication with other sentient beings in nature, in cosmos, and in AI, will we not only be able to survive this moment as we teeter on the brink of self-destruction, but to co-create with these other intelligences a flourishing future beyond our wildest imaginations. So that's what the State of the World Forum and Ubiquity University and Humanity Rising are dedicated together to catalyzing in the world at this moment. And I'm telling you, I am more joyful and more energized and more excited than at any time in my life. It's an extraordinary moment to be alive and to take on the challenges before us. One of the central initiatives of the State of the World Forum is our global education initiative to teach people the language of consciousness. And we heard last week from Bertie Jaworski, her course coming up on the 28th of January. It's going to be a 5-day online course to learn how to intelligibly communicate with various other species. And then immediately following that, beginning on the 5th of February for 4 weeks, we have another course on the science and technology of telepathy and intuition. We haven't talked a lot about intuition and intention so far. We've been describing the phenomenon of consciousness, but this course is really going to look at the relationship between telepathy and intention. And in that spirit, I want to welcome Dr. Wolfhardt Janu from Germany, has his PhD in chemistry, and he's distinguished himself by putting together some algorithms in a research group on random event generators, whereby consciousness, human consciousness, can influence technology in an extraordinarily powerful way, and in a unique way that he's going to describe in just a minute. We also have Dr. Krista Stanley with a PhD in wisdom studies from Ubiquity University. She's one of our graduates, and she is a field guide in the general domain of consciousness and clairvoyance and telepathy, having worked for many years with the Spiritual National Union. She works with people's dreams and is a facilitator and a teacher and a mentor as people learn the language of consciousness. So, Wolfhardt and Krista, please join us. And I want to begin with you, Krista, just to say a few words about yourself, and then Wolfhardt will briefly introduce himself. And then, Wolfhardt, why don't you, after your introduction, just say a little bit more about your algorithms and what you're doing with random event generators, and then we'll circle
Right.
back to
All right.
Krista and have our dialogue. Krista.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks so much for having us here today. I'm really excited about this class because when I was coming up through Ubiquity, I had always had a lot of sort of claircognizant sorts of experiences with the field of consciousness. And I was searching for answers. I wanted to know how it worked. I wanted to know what it was about, but there was not really anything definitive. And so I was a cautious skeptic. And so as I was training and doing my research, Dr. Raymond Moody was my thesis advisor. So I was having a lot of exposure to this idea of survival of consciousness, that it expands beyond our own mind and it continues after our physical body is finished. And so I started to train with mediums because I trained in something very specific called evidential medium. Because of my cautious skepticism, I needed something that could definitively ground me in my reception, in what it was that I was getting. And I think the exciting thing about this class and Wolfhardt's work is that we are now able, for the first time, to have a mechanism of being able to read the field and to be able to recognize correspondences between a syncing of mind and intention, and having some sort of record of that phenomenon. So Wolf, I'm going to pass it to you because here we go.
Okay, so let me maybe
Thank you, Krista.
thanks, Krista, and thanks, Jim, for let me being here. I think the main thing I would like to explain a little bit about what we call random event generators, and then I think I will take a point you put up, Krista, about the course. So I think that what just to put it in a few words, what I invented or what is an idea to fully automatically find structure in two random data streams. Why random data? The thing is, random is actually torn in the heart of quantum mechanics. So a random event means, for example, the radioactive decay or the noise in a Zener diode, what we are using for our random event generator, so we have electronical noise, cannot be influenced by anything classical. Classical means in this case, for example, shaking the device or temperature raise or whatever. So electromagnetic field influences are also excluded by shielding. So if you buy a random event generator, which is classified as a true random event generator, so you have a quantum mechanical random process, in this case a tunneling effect, producing zeros and ones. And now you have to imagine you have two coin flipping machines. So they're just two of them in one device flipping. And the interesting thing is that if people are going coherently into an altered state of consciousness, and this is what we already know from Tantra rituals, these two devices start to do something coherent, something in common. So you can imagine suddenly, before the ritual, they are flipping, they're making a chaotic zeros and ones, and then the ritual is starting, and suddenly they start to do the same. They're flipping at the same time zeros and ones. Yeah. At least more likely. So it's not something like a classical signal. So but it's more likely that they do something together. And we are looking with my software, we can actually look for 4 different things they can do together. Yeah. So I want to go into the mathematical and statistical details because this is not so much interesting. But basically, we're looking for 4 different things they can do together. Yeah. So and then we have a software which is analyzing the data streams and just telling you, okay, here is an interesting period where they do a specific thing together. And I would point out that we have now tons of data which are showing that during specific activities in groups, we see with a very high likelihood, a high probability that actually they can do this for hours. So we had, I think my most spectacular data show that we had a tantric ritual which went on for 7 hours, and during all the 7 hours, you saw these devices doing something together. So this is, I think.
Now, were the devices, Wolfhardt, in the room, or were they at a distance?
For this experiment, they were in a room, the same room.
The same room.
The same room. Yes. They were in
And
the same room.
were the people engaging in the tantric session, were they intending to influence the generator, or were they just doing their thing and the generator just was sort of sympathetic listening, as it were?
Yes, the second one. So I think this is an actually important variable in experiment. So nobody tried to influence the event generators. They were just running in the background, but the whole group was enthusiastic about the experiment and knew what actually could be. So they were very excited to be part of the experiment. So the device was in something what we are calling the organizational closure of the group, because this is changing. Yeah, if a group is forming and going together into an altered state of consciousness, yeah, this is something like there is an inside and outside afterwards, and the device must be inside of this organizational closure. Actually, the distance in space-time is just not important because we are dealing with non-local phenomenons which are bound together by meaning. So this is at least what I think it is. So this is the point. So you also can do this via Zoom sessions. But I think basically, to come back to point of Krista, I wouldn't say we have something ready-made which is demonstrating something. Also in our course, it's a kind of experiments you're all taking part in. Yeah. So the thing is, we will look if we find something. So if, for example, if we start a telepathic experiment, the device running in the background gets something. Yeah, and we can maybe then relate if it was a very intense experiment, if we get something more that it was not so intense. But we don't know this. It's a total new approach, and I have quite a lot of data from Tantra seminars, but not so much from other groups. Yeah, I have some, but it's an ongoing process which is driven by curiosity, and I think this is a very important part of it.
Yeah, let's pause there because I like to circle back to you, Krista, because I think you're making a fundamental point about the um, coming together of science and consciousness in the sense that, like with meditation, there's all kinds of data now that when a monk in the Himalayas meditates, certain brain frequencies and hormonal releases and physiological responses ensue. So I think that's one of the most exciting aspects of our time is that what used to be completely woo or marginal and you were kind of crazy if you even talked about it is now being scientifically demonstrated, as Wolfhardt just said, as completely real. That if you have a group doing a meditative session or some kind of coherent session,
Mhm.
it influences random events generators and they become more coherent. That's an extraordinary development. It's unprecedented. I think our generation may be the first generation in history where empirical science and intuitive intention and clairvoyance and consciousness are now becoming two sides of the same coin.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's really interesting that so captured me when I first became familiar with Wolf's work is this idea that the event generators are not impacted at all by our physical environment. There's no there's no it's almost like there's this purity in terms of being able to take a look at something during an event after the event has occurred and see if there are any correspondences there. And were those correspondences recognized by people who were experiencing the event? There's this timestamp that Wolf often talks about where you're kind of monitoring, you're able to have someone saying this was a very significant point in the event, and then to be able to see if the generators picked that up, if there was some sort of correspondence there. And that's what I think is just incredible.
Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you both the $64,000 question as to what you think consciousness actually is. As we get closer and closer to describing it, how would you two define what, in your view or your experience, consciousness actually is? Starting with you, Wolfhard, what have you learned about consciousness in these random event generators?
Ooh, that's a difficult question. I actually wouldn't say conscious fractions of what I think consciousness is. I
There you go,
think
fractions. I like that. Yeah, we don't know what we don't know.
so. I think if we speak about something non-local, we always mean actually there are effects or structures which are independent from time and space. Yeah. But they are bounded together by meaning. And meaning is something, on the one hand, something highly subjective, but also something intersubjective. So we can, there are very meaningful moments uh, in my life, for example, but they're not many. So you have a hierarchy of meanings, okay? And what I think is that if you create a moment which is very meaningful for a group, which is meaningful for a group or has a high meaningfulness for a group of people, this causes a structure and a run-on data. So they're pointing us to something which is
Mm,
not dependent on time and space, but which depends on this measure of meaning or importance.
Mm.
And everything which belongs to the system with this, which gives this an importance is entangled, let's say, yeah, and can exchange information which is non-bound to time and space via within disclosure. So I think it's this quite a simple term. So there is something else than space-time, yeah, something else than a network of cause and effect, which we see with classical physics or classical effects or classical psychology. There is something else which is non-local, not depends on time and space, and it's bound together by meaning. I think that's the essence.
So what you're saying is that if we're just going along, the three of us, without much intent, uh, the random event generator isn't going to respond. But as soon
No.
as we come together with meaning and we upgrade our own cohesion, that the
Mhm.
random event generator will respond in relationship to our intentional coherence,
Yes, and
whether it's a
exactly in that
tantric
moment.
ritual or we're just meditating together or we're in some ways developing sort of an intimacy between us with intent. Is that the
Definitely,
correct
yes, that's a very
understanding?
good description. I think the important thing is it will respond exactly at the moment where we three decide to go into a shared intention. So the time correlation, when does this happen? This will be picked up by the RHGs, and this is also how you can distinguish this. Yeah, so you see a period where they're doing nothing suspicious or nothing ordered. They're just chaotic, and then exactly at the moment, so plus minus a few seconds, when we decide to go into coherent space, there is a high likelihood they will pick it up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this reminds me of the experience of what was his name, Ed Baxter I think it was in the 60s. He was the guy who developed the lie detector for the military initially.
Mhm,
And he was in his office and he, having developed a lie detector for the military. One night he was working late and thought, I wonder whether that rubber plant that he had in the corner of his room uh, would respond. And he hooked it up. Nothing happened. And then he had the thought, what if I take my lighter and burn one of the leaves?
mhm,
And instantly, when he created the intent,
mhm.
the lie detector hooked up to the rubber plant leaf just went off the chart and indicated stress. So that relationship between intent and coherence in the human realm
Mhm, mhm.
affects the machine.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Krista, what would you add to this? This is very foundational.
Yeah, I think that the a really critical point of all of this is there are kind of several things here. Um, if if in a group, let's say, you have someone who just doesn't believe in what the rest of the group is talking about, or they don't understand that they have the ability to receive, to receive information in a certain way, or, a naysayer, this can create static in the field. And
Mm,
so part of the work, essentially, it kind of breaks the closed system, I would say.
Mhm.
So part of the work that we're going to be doing is what sorts of things do we need? How do we need to stretch our belief structure into maybe more post-materialist sorts of understanding of consciousness? And also what a belief in our own abilities telepathically, that there is something that happens, and often this is demonstrated through phenomenological data. People having precognitive experiences or dreams, or knowing that their mother's going to call and then the phone rings, and all these sorts of different kinds of receptive abilities that not only are telepathic, but also are received in our bodies. We're embodied for a reason, and we get information through our senses. So we'll be dealing primarily with the telepathic, the mind to mind, small m to capital M sort of situation, and what it is that we can do to assist in closing the system.
yeah.
I get that, Wolf?
Yeah, you got it.
Good. Good.
Yeah, that's so interesting that incoherence can destabilize coherence. Because I know in talking with Kai Dickens, the author of the Telepathy tapes podcast that has become a global phenomenon, she talks about autistic young people who are very clairvoyant, but in many cases, when their father walks in the room, their clairvoyance stops because the fathers typically don't believe it's true. So
Yes.
let's unpack that for a minute. How do you both understand this relationship between incoherence and coherence and the ability to affect the random event generator? What's actually happening?
Okay, so I think what we already pointed out before, I think the Wyrdscope or the two REGs we have must be in the same what we call closure. Yeah, organizational closure. But what is an organizational closure? I think if you come coherent together in a group, you have at a certain point the feeling of an in-group and out-group. So basically, as soon as you have something like this, you have, or in a ritual, then it would have a closure also in time, space and time for a few hours. This is something which is special, yeah, and where it's clearly defined what is inside this period and space and what is outside, yeah. And within this system, this closed system, the random event generators are just doing what the group is doing, yeah. So getting more coherent, getting more synchronized, feeling more in sync. And I think what you described from this telepathy tip, that's very simple. If the father comes in and he's skeptic, or another person who's a mainstream scientist who doesn't believe and think it's all crap, and coming into the room where the mother is sitting with the child, they're both in a very
Mm,
intimate closure. There is a clear inside outside, yeah, a clear inside the closure, the clairvoyant child or autistic child with his mother, and maybe that maybe something which is recording that, yeah, and you have an outside skeptical observance or a general audience, and if now somebody from the outside comes in, actually in group out group gets disturbed, the closure gets weaker, and then
mhm.
what we
Yeah,
see
got it. Yeah.
in all cases that the effect doesn't disappear at once. It gets weaker. Yeah, so we have a clear communication first, clear telepathic message. I think in the telepathy tapes, they're really good in that. And then you will see a drop. It gets more blurry. And then even maybe if 10 people, skeptic people come in and say that's all crap and make emotional pressure, and also the actually emotional basis of this coherence breaks down, then you will see the effect will just disappear and will be just total random. So you won't get anything out of that. So it's very important for a high quality or for telepathy and a lot of side effects that you have a really good closure, yeah, together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And there
good.
are,
But
of course, some tricks for documentation, but this would lead too deep
yeah.
for that, yeah. So I
So
would
let's,
have also some ideas if the effect is going down, how we can bring it up again. So there are a lot of things you can do. You can design this actually if you want to.
mm, mm. Yeah, you can play with that
Yeah,
relationship
of course,
and
yeah.
make it go up and down. That's
Mm.
fascinating. That is totally fascinating. Wow. Let's broaden the conversation now to other dimensions of consciousness beyond influencing, random event generators. And I know that's work that you've been doing a lot of, Krista, starting with your experience with Ray Moody. I remember the courses that we had with him at Ubiquity University maybe 10 years ago or so, and the mind-blowing revelations that occurred during his course. Ray Moody, everyone, for those of you who may not know, was one of the great thanatologists. He was the first one in the Western tradition in the modern time that really focused on this extraordinary phenomenon of near-death experiences and the fact that death is pretty porous and and that consciousness can extend beyond it. And then during operations, people's consciousness goes to the ceiling and they watch things happen. And it was really Ray Moody at the University of Virginia that opened that whole field in the face of extraordinary skepticism initially, but now it's becoming more and more scientifically explicated. But it led to a real exploration of, again, what is consciousness and how consciousness and matter are intertwined, but they're not the same, that they can become disengaged, and somehow our awareness is on the consciousness side, even though it's mediated through our body. So, Krista, just say a little bit more about how you've come to understand some of the nuances and layers of consciousness through your work in clairvoyance.
Um, I think the most important thing that I've had to acquire, an understanding of, is that we're like syncing with the field. Our mind is syncing with a field, and we are almost there's not a transmission per se of information, but we're in the information. And the meaning,
Yes, we're in the
we're
information.
in
There
the
we go.
information,
Yes,
and the
good one.
meaning quadrant or quotient that Wolf is speaking about is that when it's like things come together around a meaning. And we don't know what that meaning is. We often expect meaning to come in fully formed. We're used to that. You read a book, you understand fully, right? There it is. And it's not the way it happens when you're in the information. You get pieces of it. And when there are groups of people working together, it's almost as if you can feel the magnetism of the pieces coming together. But that's been a very difficult thing to learn because we're so dual, like the mind and the working of consciousness is not bound by physical properties in other than our brain functioning. And even then not. So that's what the near-death experience has demonstrated, is that even when the brain is no longer functioning, something is still happening. And you have moved from an embodied state to a disembodied state, but it's still a conscious state. And so that's where you kind of have to allow this division to drop so that you're synced. And I guess I would describe it more like a daydream. When you're in a daydream, you don't know you're in the daydream. You're just in it until you snap out of it. And then when you snap out of it, stuff drops into your awareness. And so there we have the process of moving into cognitive processing. But my guess would be when you're in the daydream and you're synced, that's when the random event generators are going to show these coherences, either in the way that they measure those. And they're very short periods of time. And it's kind of a coming into and moving out of constantly.
Yeah, yeah. So why don't we spend a few minutes describing the different sessions that you'll be covering in your course, because you're bringing together some extraordinary strands around telepathy and intention and in consciousness influencing random event generators and so forth. So maybe starting with you, Wolfhardt, why don't you just lay out what's going to happen when the students take your course?
I think one of the main things I think we will dive in from different angles into telepathy. So I think the practical part. So actually, the how to is mainly done by Krista, and I will give some of the scientific background. So we will have some. Of course, we will have the opportunity to have what is now a Wyrdscope, so two random event generators running all the time. And in the end of a session or between the sessions, I will have an analysis of the data. We will have some timestamps in the data, which we'll do during the session. And then we look actually, okay, was there a response of our group, of the group we are forming during the experiments? Is there some structure in the data? How anomalous the data are during which session? So we will get some feedback from the random event generators. to 4 hour sessions, and we will have an analysis, a short analysis.
Gotcha.
So I will just tell, okay, last session we had these and these peaks, we had there and there. There was a correspondence there and there, or there was not so much. Also can be the case, and then we
So
could
each one of the classes,
yes,
like with the Tantra session, there will be a random event
yeah,
generator sort
definitely,
of sitting
yeah,
there monitoring the course. So all the students will have to really pay attention.
yes. So, but this will be, I would say, don't expect to be a really 100% rigor and rough
Yeah, yeah.
scientific feedback. It's always a level of playfulness inside. So it will be a qualitative feedback just for curiosity. And I think on the other hand, I think always if you go to telepathy, you have two ways of stepping into an experiment. There is a difference between telepathic experience and then telepathic experiment. And I think we will also go through it and point this out. What is the difference? So, of course, if you have an experiment, you have to fix some parameters and you have to have afterwards a statistical analysis. Was the result significant or not? Yeah. And maybe to get deeper into the telepathic experience where there are no control parameters at all, the anomaly might be higher, but you cannot classify it. So what I know from the psi research is that actually the most spectacular results you often get during the experience. So there are no parameters. Yeah. For example, somebody has a picture and nobody else knows what the picture is in his mind. And then suddenly one participant has the full picture. I mean, it's a very seldom event. Yeah. But I was once, I did an experiment with a group of 20 people where exactly this happened. But this was an experience because actually you cannot do statistic out of that. Yeah. And we will go then into the differences of these. And I will guide you also through some very basic statistical calculations to evaluate if a telepathic experiment was significant or not. So this is, I would say, is the science background I will bring in. And I will bring in a lot of anecdotes because I did a lot of practical psi research. Yeah, I did a lot of telepathic experiments, precognitive experiments in the last 25 years. And I will bring in a lot of anecdotes. And also, I think even the statistic I will teach a little bit will be actually a statistic of a real paranormal experiment I did. So even this example is actually a practical one.
Gotcha. So the students will actually see the effects of their intention and coherence
Yeah, hopefully.
live.
They will. I mean, at least
That's
we have
extraordinary. That's extraordinary. Everybody will be at the edge of their seat. Krista, what will you be covering?
Well, I'll be working at the idea of the experience is really my realm. And I look at it at the difference between looking directly at something and kind of maintaining a peripheral vision in that you're just experimenting with, which are the things that we'll be doing, is we'll be experimenting with different sorts of reception, telepathic, embodied reception, kind of getting acclimated to our own positioning in that and our thoughts about it, seeing results from our ability to understand which card has been pulled. So we're reading cards, Zener cards, they call them, or as Birdie would do, remote viewing. So in an envelope is a picture. Can anybody, like, what do you think? What is that in that envelope? That kind of thing, to become acclimated to and stretch ourselves into this kind of shared space so that we're sharing the space together and understanding each other's capabilities, and also that we're sharing the space with the world, and information is coming into us in a way that is not require cognitive reasoning, logical understanding, and it's different. And so I'll be getting everybody acclimated to that, and so that experience, that experiential kind of juju can get all stirred up.
Well, let's pause there because I think you've identified the great stumbling block in the Western civilizational mind to kind of grokking this, because the inherited scientific and in some ways theological, philosophical tradition in which we've been raised basically says that what you just said isn't true. And what Wolf has been talking about isn't true either. Remember the Princeton experiment, you both know, where the guy from the physics department said, even if you prove it to me, I still won't believe it.
Yes.
So what Krista just said, folks, is like the big boulder in the road. And the boulder is nothing objective or empirical. It's purely subjective in our minds. Because we don't believe it, it doesn't happen to us. And so talk a little bit, both of you actually, about what needs to be for the Western mind, what needs to be let go for
Okay.
clairvoyance to be fluent within us.
I will put it maybe from a scientific point of view. Yeah, I think what many people are not aware, what we call the Cartesian cut. This is the cut between the inside and outside, the inner experience and the outer experiment, inside and the outside. Was just a political deal in Europe in the early Enlightenment movements. So basically, when the Enlightenment movement, so the early scientific movement became so strong, the church couldn't suppress it anymore by killing the scientists because it got too strong. They did a compromise. So Descartes, the whole Descartesian principle of
Yeah,
this Cartesian cut, this is actually a political compromise. What they said is everything which
exactly.
is inside, it's only for the church, and everything which is outside, an object, something to be observed, this can be investigated by science. And so in the Western tradition, we have this strict separation between the observed and the observer. This is actually it's really like this is the main story of Western science until now. So the scientist is outside the system he's observing. Yeah. And I think what we can say is, I mean, I think we learned a lot with this perspective of a scientist. We developed all this technology and so on and so on. But now we are actually on the border or on the end of this journey. I think that the questions you're asking now and what we're seeing now, also with the random event generators, what we already saw with quantum mechanics, where just is that actually everything which is not investigatable, yeah, with this Cartesian cut now becomes you must actually investigate it from the inside and outside at the same time. So
Exactly.
all phenomena we are looking for, you cannot actually investigate if you're purely outside the system. You must be somehow also inside the system. You must experience it, and then if you have a device which can track it from the outside, you get a common documentation of what happens. So, but it's a first step to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you're so right, Wolf, that Descartes is brilliantly remembered because he did something political. He was the one that cut the baby in half,
Yes.
but the baby should have never been cut in half. And our generation is really bringing the baby back together, starting with quantum mechanics, and the observer affects that which is observed. I mean, that was a huge revolutionary breakthrough, about 100 years ago now, in quantum mechanics with Heisenberg and all those physicists back then. And we're the result of that. So, Krista, when you were saying in your opening remarks that what's exciting is that science and the interior coming back together in a supportive, synergistic way is the Copernican revolution of our time in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, and I think that cut is shifting because science isn't going away, and it's certainly done a huge amount of allowing us to understand our world, our physical
Mm.
world. But what's happening is I think it's shifting from us being told how things are to us experiencing how things are. And so rather than the church giving us a framework of how this this interior is, we are now being freed, I think, liberated in terms of being able to understand it ourselves and experience it in ourselves, and then see the jibing, how the jibing is coming together, how the worlds are coming together. And it's interesting that the quantum world, science, has made these huge advancements in terms of our shifting of our understanding of how it all works.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a profound point, I think, because in the last, say, 50 years, beginning in the 1960s, our generation threw off both science and religion. And this is what Paul Ray called the cultural creatives.
Yes.
We were that generation that went after sort of raw experience as the ultimate grounding. And when science would support it, or when various spiritual traditions would support it. So we were very eclectic.
Yes.
The cultural creatives were very eclectic, as Paul Ray would say, and it was always around what experience in my life makes me feel the most authentic.
Mhm.
And in throwing off the strictures of both science and religion, we've unleashed an extraordinary possibility for the human future, including what you folks are doing. And because we honored the authenticity of our own experience, we're now being able to bring science and different religious traditions into a new level of relevance to the
Yes.
human journey.
It's
Does that
very,
make sense, Wolf?
Yeah.
we are on just, we are living in an incredible time.
Totally.
Just it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the amount of creativity and ingenuity and self-expression that are all coming up and upwelling in very difficult times. It's not like there's suppression here. There's huge upwelling of understanding through these currents that can feel very oppressive. And I
Yeah.
think we have to capitalize on that.
Yeah. 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 Individuality is coming to fruition in a collective way. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
A
Yes.
totally beautiful thing. So as we draw this session to a close, I want to bring in a question that Rita Marsh just put in the chat, which I think is really important. Thank you, Rita. Sort of, what's love got to do with this? At the State of the World Forum, over and over, we had people that were talking about this domain, talk about the fact that in the end, they experienced love. Ray Moody talks about this a lot in terms of near-death experience. You just go into this white light and you feel this love and this support and intimacy with the universe when you ascend and break down the strictures of doubt and skepticism. And that's when you really experience love as an intimate reality of consciousness and clairvoyance. So talk to us about how you as individuals have experienced this or not in your journey into consciousness.
Uh, I'll start. I,
Yeah,
I
you start, Krista. Okay.
to me, I would think that for me, the love is the sinking, the sinking with, the being with. And in
Mm.
my life, it was always, love was defined in one way or another. And it could have been blackmail in my family. It could have been, there are all these kind of things that love kind of takes on. And I've had to shed concepts that I've held or beliefs about what it's supposed to be or not be. And having the experience of this sinking is what kind of made me understand, this is love. And
Yeah.
so that would be my explanation of that.
I love this notion of love as an experience of sinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. That's totally, totally beautiful. Beautiful. Wolf, what would you say?
I would
What's
say
love got to do with this?
I think I think that I would bring it to a point where to a subset of love, to the point falling in love to a person, which is of course not the same in love, but it's also a subset of the whole what we call love, because this is actually if two people fall in love together, this actually creates one of the most strongest organizational closures possible. So it's
Mm,
very, I mean, this moment and the time afterwards, people are very two persons are very synchronized, having sometimes often telepathic experiences and so on and so on. And I think it is a very good example. This is exactly what we think an organizational closure is. And the falling in love period of a couple is one of the phases where you have the strongest organizational closure which is possible for humans. So there is also an experience what a closure can be. Yeah, it's one very positive experience of what an organizational closure can be. And you can think is then to more universal love. I think at the end you experience that separation is just an illusion and everybody is connected with everybody else. And if you let go these boundaries, in the end you feel love. That's actually an expression to be not alone, to be connected with everything.
Beautiful.
yeah, in some ways, it is love that binds. If we understand love in the sense that Krista was just
Mhm.
describing it, really, love is that function that creates coherence.
Mm.
Mhm.
As a group comes together with a common intention, that's sort of the act of love. That's what love does. Love brings things together into a synchronicity
Mm.
that allows an intention to have an effect in the real world. So when we're experiencing love as we explore consciousness, we're really experiencing that intelligence, if you will, that binds everything together as one. It's a beautiful, beautiful notion. So thank you both for this very profound discussion today. I've enjoyed it very much, and I want to recommend everyone Krista and Wolfhardt's course on the science and consciousness of telepathy and intention. It starts on the 5th of February, be 4 weekly sessions on February 5th and then the 12th, 19th, etc., through the month of February. It's an online course that will expand your mind and lead to what Plato called the enlargement of your soul. So thank you both. And thank you, everyone. Krista and Wolf will join the after chat for a bit. You all received the link in your uh, Zoom reminder for today, and Stan has put the link in the chat box. Thank you all so much. This is a very exciting time to be alive, learning the mother tongue, being able to just experience this together to enable humanity to rise. So thank you, Wolf. Thank you, Krista. Always
Thank
a
you for being
pleasure.
here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jim.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.